I am your host, Jennifer Sertl. Welcome to Studio A3R. Studio A3R explores agency, agility, and accelerated reality, the human capacity to thrive in this age of accelerated change. For more than 2 decades, I've worked with leaders, organizations, and communities navigating complexity, uncertainty, and transformation. And along the way, I've become increasingly fascinated by one question: how do we remain fully human while expanding what is possible through technology? Each episode of Studio A3R features thinkers, builders, researchers, and changemakers whose work helps us better understand ourselves, one another, and the future we are creating together. Before I introduce today's guest, I want to acknowledge Josie Gibson of the Catalyst Network. She's been a previous guest of Studio A3R and someone I've been fortunate to know for over a decade. Josie's work she works globally to discover and amplify voices of people helping to shape the future. She has this remarkable ability to recognize emerging ideas, connect kindred spirits, and really illuminate the constellations that exist between people, places, and possibility. So, hi, Josie. I'm really grateful that you introduced me to our guest today, Dr. Hamish Sewell. Dr. Hamish Sewell, I'm going to call him Hamish after this, but Dr. Hamish Sewell is an oral historian, documentary producer, researcher, and the founder of Soundtrails. Soundtrails is a pioneering platform that helps communities bring stories back onto the landscape through immersive, place-based listening experiences. For more than a decade, he himself has explored the intersection of storytelling, memory, technology, and place. And what he's done with that is help communities preserve cultural heritage while creating deeper experiences of belonging. His doctoral research examines how locative audio and place-based storytelling can actually transform the way we understand both places we inhabit and the stories that shape us. In a world that often rewards speed over presence, Hamish's work is a powerful reminder that listening is more than hearing. It is a practice of attention, stewardship, and connection. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Jennifer.
So much fun. So let's just dive in. A place matters. You spent years helping communities bring stories back onto the landscape through Soundtrails. So please explain in your language what Soundtrails is, and then what convinced you that place matters more than people realize.
I don't think place matters more than people, but place and people are a connection. They're a beautiful story connection that we all have to. Well, I suppose I'd like to maybe start with the idea of that deep poetic connection that voices have to landscape. And I think if you really want to go right back, you could go back to something like the change in the language, where the Greeks were transferring from an oral culture through to a spoken. Beg your pardon. They're transferring from an oral culture through to a written culture, and I think there were real concerns around that, which we can see in some of the documentation where Aristotle's talking about the loss of the beauty, the loss of the intimacy, the loss of the sense that we're all here sort of together in the now. And I think when you really think about the way in which we connect ourselves to places, it's invariably through our memories, our connections, our lived connections. It's a lived experience. And I think that we are really moving away inexorably from that at the moment. And there's a very different, I think, profound transference of sort of an experience when we actually do hear, walk, and experience places in the world around us. We're relative creatures. We're always in relationship, and it's very easy, I think, these days to disappear into a virtual fantasy world which is disconnected. So I think one of the things I've really enjoyed, having come from a background of writing and storytelling, is that idea that places are so much more than just these sort of static, tangible things. They're these living, breathing interrelationships between us, our ancestors, today, the past, the memories that we carry, and the different layers of history that are built on to these places. And we're constantly in relationship with these places. It's a very deep and profound relationship that we have. And I guess something like Soundtrails, which is what I would call a location-based audio app. There's all sorts of ways of describing an app like Soundtrails. From, what would we say? We might say something like narrative cartography. That's one word we could use. We could use locative media. But effectively, they're using GPS to not only track where we're walking, but to place different voices and sounds and stories relative to places. And I think that is an art of storytelling. That is an art of becoming aware of kind of the world around us in different ways. And the voice, unlike the image, has a very different resonance. It has a cadence. It has a vernacular. It has timing. It has humor. It has a lived kind of granularity to it in the voice, in the way that we might connect to the place, the people around us, the history. And I think through that, there's this beautiful sense of connection with us as the listeners. As we walk around these places, we're no longer the sort of disembodied kind of brain, connecting with something which doesn't really have any bearing on us. We're in relationship, direct relationship to the storied world around us insofar as who we are and where we belong right now. We are here in the now, and these things bear reference to where we are. They attest to the people who've lived here, the people who've died here, the people who've loved here. They attest to that deep, intimate relationship, often, through great struggle that people have had. They attest to the knowledge systems that connect us to the land around us, to the plants, to the wildlife, to the animals, to the seasons. There's no end of connections in that deep DNA in our blood. The voices bring out, and I guess in many ways you could say that my work with Soundtrails has been something of a love affair of that deep, beautiful, intimate connection that we have through the voiced world, through the storied world, through the sound world, to the physical world around us.
And
that was a long explanation.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I mean, it's your passion, and it's like you were playing the guitar, and I'm like, he's okay. It's jazz now. I will certainly include an image and link to the Soundtrails app. But is there like one story, like, because it sounds a little abstract right now, and I want for our listeners to maybe get a sense. So can you maybe share one of your favorite Soundtrails or a Soundtrail that embodies those things that you just described to give people a real tactical experience of what's been built on your platform?
Jennifer, there are hundreds. There are simply hundreds and hundreds of stories, and I'll reference one maybe. There's a site called Portland in northern New South Wales. In New South Wales, it's to the west of Sydney. The town's trying to move from coal through to renewables. It's looking for a new way of engaging people and finding a sort of a connection back to its its history. So it was a cement manufacturing town in the 1900s. It was a big industrial town, and everybody in that town was in some ways connected umbilically to cement manufacturing. In case you don't know, cement manufacturing is very much down the food chain in terms of sort of the extracting industries. It's probably even below coal mining. And so they were pretty tough towns. I think at one point there were a number of thousands of people who were living there, their families, the wives, But there's one point which I think is very powerful for the families there, and that is the first pit which opened up in town, and that was where they were extracting limestone, and then in the sheds or the main sort of generator room, they had a big kiln, they had a big fire kiln. So a lot of men who were working there, they were in the pit. And as you can imagine, over the 1900s, the occupational health and safety conditions were appalling at the beginning. So a lot of men died in that pit, and we've done a 10-minute GPS-activated audio walk that is really something of a kind of a meditation in many ways to these men. And we drew on a number of newspaper articles because there was a lot of struggle between the people in the town and the company to get compensation. So I think something like close to 100 men died in that pit over the course of 50, 60 years. And that trail is not only, I guess, a document of the people who worked in that town and the relationships that they had to the mining sector, to the buildings, the different buildings that they worked in, from the generator room through to the the ambulance station. There's all these different sites, but there's a 10-minute walk around that limestone pit, which is something of a sonic kind of meditation. And in there, of course, are the voices of the people, and there's the truck drivers, there's the people who worked on explosives. They were lowered down the face of the pit every day with crowbars to try to wedge rocks which have been stuck. There were the people who were working the little mini railway which would haul material out of there. There were even initially, early on, there were horses that were pulling stuff out of there. And so for 10 minutes, as you walk around what is now today a 200 deep feet lake, and people fish there, so it almost looks quite beautiful. It's quite deceptive, but that was really the site where men died, or men were injured, men lost their legs, men lost their fingers, and there would be an alarm that would go off when men were seriously injured, and the whole town lived in fear of hearing this alarm, which would go off. And there was often this kind of refrain, which was, at least it's not my father. So that's one of the stories of about 17 stories that really draws out, I suppose, that deep working connection that those people had to that town site in the course of, I guess, trying to eke out existences as cement manufacturing, blue collar workers with very little security there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much. First and foremost, there's an element of reverence of being able to use Soundtrails to honor history and to bring those voices that you were able to, archive. And it seems like a really intense project to bring all that history into an experience. And for the first time, I'm experiencing that I'm experiencing archaeology. I'm experiencing anthropology. I'm experiencing history. And when you mentioned the limestone geology, it's just, it's so interesting to hear that in that 10-minute segment, you know, you've created such a cross-disciplinary experience for even our listeners here in this moment. So interesting.
Yeah, and that's maybe a tougher one. I mean, there's some real beautiful. There's a lot of beauty in here, I think, in terms of people's deep connection to place. You know, well, not all of us. I mean, some of us don't, but even if you've grown up in the city, there'll be a connection to the streets, to the smells, to the seasons. So I think most of us do have that deep sort of embodied connection to places that we draw on. It gives us a sense of how we're shaped and who we are.
Well, I certainly, you know, I'm having this program after spending 11 days in Portugal and being able to go to Tomar, and, you know, like there's something about seeing history, the ancient rocks and the ancient buildings. It just is such a reminder of humanity, and I love that you started the program with Aristotle, like the idea that there was him kind of mourning intimacy, while we today are kind of mourning a lack of intimacy. Well, I really appreciate that example, and there's many more, and I'll create with you some hyperlinks to some of the stories and give a little bit of context for that. I know that you work with indie producers, and you also work with education. Can you help share how those two entities use the platform differently?
Sure. So we're a platform which is available for people to publish on, but we also curate. So we're not prepared to put anybody's project out there. We want to know what it is that people are doing, and we consider that we've kind of got the bar quite high with Soundtrails. So we are curating what we have out there. But we have what we call an indie license, and for people who know what they're doing with audio and with sound and with that whole sort of realm of, I guess, the sort of the audio storytelling experience, we're very open to people publishing on our platform. And so we've worked with a number of producers now. We've worked with one, Simon Bradley, who's from the UK. He was working with a fellow on a project in Mexico around the Mexican pyramids, bringing the Aztec stone flute instruments alive. Quite sort of a history in itself. And we've worked with some here in Australia, a musician here who did a trail through the community, working with the Aboriginal community through to the people who are basically regenerating the whole area around there out of Melbourne. So we're quite open to working with producers, and we really want to help them get some great stuff out there. At the moment, we're working with some producers in Darwin, and they're building an audio walk there. I think it'll be quite an unconventional one. I know that they're really trying to work against the idea of this being this sort of audio walk in a didactic way. They're trying to, I think, work with community, with Aboriginal people. It's very much going to be a street audio walk. It'll be around the streets of Darwin. Conversely, we've also got this learning platform, and that's geared around EDUs, education sector. We've done quite a lot of work with schools, and we've worked now with, I think, about 4 or 5 universities. And the universities themselves, they'll bring in students who have a direct relationship with either audio or placemaking, and they might use the platform to explore the beauty and the world of audio walks from just something pretty basic through to something which they might even consider getting published. So the students are given a bit of a a free rein and get to play on our platform. The teachers can see all the student works that are under their cohort. They can come in on the back end. They can look at them and mark them. And then, of course, everyone can get out on the street if they're nearby, and they can just test them straight away. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's great. And I'm thinking, even I'm trying to figure out, as an adjunct professor at Rochester Institute of Technology, I'm wondering, who and how I can plug into someone to see what we could do. I'd like to see some Soundtrails in the USA. When I'd done it before, a lot of the places were 4,000 miles away from me, which is great. Yeah. Recently, the Knicks won in New York City, and it was such a celebration. There's part of me that really would love to have a sound trail that actually experiences the audio walk of the multicultural, joyful experience and hopeful experience that we had here in New York very recently. And one of the things I'm wondering if someone were creating sound trails 100 years from now about our present moment, what particular story would you like to have told? I'm trying to think of it as kind of we talked about found footage and the idea that things found in the future as a time box. What I'm wondering is what would be the story that you would want told 100 years from now?
Love, really. It's kind of love. It's love of connection. It's love of our place in this world. It's love of the way in which stories have been such an important, the way they've made connection, and I suppose our creativity that sort of underpins so much of that. I mean, that's one thing which I think just continually sort of resurfaces, particularly at a time like now where I think a lot of us are, there's a lot of mental illness, there's a lot of people who are very fractured and very sort of, I think, feeling very uncertain as to sort of what the future holds. But this is about grounding. This is about our blood and our DNA sort of essentially being, mineral. We're of soil and earth, and and our stories come out of soil and earth, and our people come out of soil and earth, and our people have toiled, and we continue to toil. And there's this amazing capacity for love and creativity that we have, that we can harness. And I think that's where voices and sounds and stories really are able to bring that out relative to who we are, relative to our forebears, relative to people who are alive at the moment, and relative to country. And so I think that if in 100 years people were to be listening to that, it would be a celebration of that.
That's great. Thank you, Hamish, for joining us. You've been listening to Dr. Hamish Sewell, founder of Soundtrails, Geolocative Walks. The work is really about stewardship, helping. And what I love and why I really wanted him to be a guest is that a lot of technology seems as if it's dehumanizing, or we have to almost say, what's the usefulness of being human? And what I love is that the whole platform is based on technology, and it's in the cloud, and it uses a lot of software. We use a lot of these tools that we're now could be dehumanizing, but they're being used in ways to really, really kind of celebrate sense of relationship, sense of place, memory. It's a living example of what I often describe as recoverable humanity. So to everyone listening, I hope this conversation encourages you to think about places that you think would be a great audio walk, or something historical to be preserved, or something to be celebrated. And I hope you also consider how listening itself can become a practice of connection. This is Jennifer Sertl. You've been listening to Studio A3R, where we explore agency, agility, and human capacity to thrive in accelerated change. Thanks for joining us.